Okay, hey everyone. This is a unofficial stream. It's kind of an extra, and it's something I'm doing because I've been working with Duik Bassel for a few weeks now, and I've discovered a whole bunch of little things that I would like to quickly share because I'm recording it for a tutorial, but I realize a tutorial is a long way off as they take a lot of time to make. So I wanted to quickly touch on a few things that I've discovered. I'm on I think my third time rebuilding this empty rig, and I discovered a couple of problems with the original, which is over here. It's just a copy of the original. And the first thing, which is really dumb, is I made the arms too short, which is kind of obvious. I made them too short, but I was following an anatomic reference from Design Doll, and I think their arms were just too short, and I wasn't using my artistic sense or my better judgment. I knew they were short, but I kept going with it anyway, thinking I was wrong. But they were too short, so I had to lengthen the arms. But in doing that, I had to go back and re-rig everything, and I discovered a whole bunch of stuff that might be useful because I found this actual rig. It's pretty slow, like moving things around. It takes quite a while to see what's going on, and I was trying to figure out if I could, what was happening and what was slowing it down, and what I could do to speed things up. And I found that in Duik Bassel, there's a whole bunch of little features to help speed things up, but there's also consequences in some of them that were unexpected that I didn't realize, which made me have to go back and redo things several times. So I thought what I would do is really quickly bump through a few of the things I discovered that have been time sinks for me and have had to make me redo some of the work. So let's just hop in really, really quick. I'm just going to save this scene first as a backup, and I'll start a new project just so you guys can see. I'm not going to go through a whole rig because that'll take hours and hours. But what I will do is just really quickly try to review some of the things I've been running into. So I'm going to pull in this rig, which I believe it should be the one that oh no, this isn't the one I fixed. I fixed a new rig here. I think I put it in my shared folder here. Sorry guys. This is not very fast. This is definitely not one of the just the facts here ones here, which we are obviously we're trying to do for the next version of this. Okay, here we go. So first thing I did is I've resized the composition. Whoops. To make it smaller because I think the rig was a little bit too big. It was 6K squared roughly. So I've resized it, brought it down to about 5. Okay, I was making it for 4K productions, but realizing that most people aren't making 4K productions, it's a little bit overkill. So the character's down to 5,000 by 5,000. Now the crummy thing about doing hey Permod, welcome to the unofficial stream. I'm just doing something really quick here on the side. Anyways, the one thing, the one of the downsides of rigging in After Effects is that if you do want to change the size of something, you have to re-rig everything. So so that's one of the big hangups. So let's get into this. Pramod, I wasn't planning on streaming today. I've discovered a bunch of stuff. I'm rebuilding the empty rig again. So I just wanted to share with you guys some of the things I discovered and why I'm having to redo it. Sort of as like some quick notes that I'm going to save for an actual tutorial that I'm recording. I've been recording and I've had to go back and re-record stuff because I've made mistakes. So I want to show you guys what those mistakes are because I've been doing rigging in After Effects for quite a while and some of these things took me by surprise. So let's just pretend this is our character, and the first thing we're going to do before we start rigging in Duik Bassel is we're going to create structures. Now, structures threw me off at first. I wasn't sure even what they were, and they're essentially an architecture to hang your puppet pins on or whatever else. So you could build the structure first. Actually, that's the first thing I guess you would possibly do, just to make sure everything's moving properly. So I guess let's just do that for now. It's going to be the first step. So one thing I didn't realize is these little circles down here, these are settings tabs, and they allow you to change how the structures will be built. You can build one structure at a time, or you can just build the whole thing. So if you, in here, I like to have a shoulder because I like to use a clavicle because it makes the motion better. I don't have any claws on this specific character. You could add them, it's up to you. Then you go back here, and I want to do the settings on the leg. Everything looks good here. Whoops, and I want to go check the head. And for the spine, I'm finding the 2 layers is fine. For the neck, I like to have also 2 layers, so that gives you a middle joint. Otherwise, you just have a base and a top, so you don't get like you can't really curl the neck, so it's kind of harder if you have a longer neck. I don't know. I'm just experimenting with it, but I like a neck that's got a little bit of the ability to curl it a bit. Even though necks don't really curl that much. The spine is fine. You could do 3. I'm just doing 2 for now. It seems to work okay, especially since the characters are a little bit bigger. Actually, you know what? Let's just do 3 so we can have a look at what it looks like anyway. So I'm not going to create yet. You have to go back and check all these things. We don't have a tail, so I'm not doing a tail. Not sure add a structure, what that one does. Oh, so you can create your own structure. I see. Okay, so after you've done the settings on all these, you can just create the structure. Now, it's going to take a little while to build, depending on how fast your computer is. And these things can also be slow to work with. Now, I'm working in a fairly big composition. I've got the resolution cranked down because it's a 5K, or it might be, yeah, it's a 5K composition. What I've done is I've changed my settings to render every 8 pixels. So that's pretty low. It's lower than quarter. And then that way I can move pretty fast. Even though I've got a pretty strong computer, that doesn't really matter that much with After Effects. It's really a RAM beast. So the other thing you're going to find is that nothing's parented specifically when you make a structure. So the arms and everything kind of float separately. And this is really good, especially in the beginning, so that you can position things the way you want without every time you change something in the spine, everything goes with it. But it can be a little bit confusing when you first start. And this is a good thing, because if you mess up your arm and you have to build a new structure, so let's say I did something and my arm wasn't right, and I didn't have enough joints, or my spine wasn't right, what this allows me to do is I can delete the whole spine and get rid of it, because if I've made a mistake, you want to delete the whole thing, and then I can just rebuild it. So if I just click on spine, it'll make a new spine, and that doesn't break everything else. So that's a really cool thing there. It doesn't position itself quite properly, but that's okay. So that's great. Now the other thing to take note of here, which surprised me, this is the first big surprise or frustrating thing once I got through the rig, is that, so you see these end bones, and these are meant to be the end of the chain. They're kind of like you could do something with them or not. They're really just something you could tie a puppet pin to or whatever. They're really good. They're important on the toes and the feet, because these end bones here actually dictate where the foot and toe roll and stuff are. But for the thing I didn't really get is with the pelvis. The pelvis has to be centered on the pelvis. So you'll see later when you actually build the control, when you rotate the pelvis, it doesn't rotate the spine. Like, not everything rotates from the spine like this. When you actually rotate the pelvis, this stays still and this moves the pelvis. So what I had done is I thought that this was kind of an end joint, and maybe that's just dumb of me, but I thought the pelvis had to go down here, and then it would come up here. Then I would start here. But that actually creates a huge problem, because your pelvis doesn't rotate from the right point. It then rotates the whole pelvis from the bottom. So you want this centered on whatever it is your pelvis is. Now, this is a multi-layered character, so it may seem a bit more complicated, but it is something to just pay attention to. These are centered on the points that you want to rotate them from. Same thing with, let's say, so we've done the pelvis. Now, for me, because I have a jacket or a shirt or whatever on top of this character, they're not naked, I'm trying to build in the spine rotation. So on the pelvis, I'm going to have the pelvis be a little bit flexible, just to kind of gummy the character up a little bit, because usually they'll be wearing clothes and the pelvis isn't 100% rigid. So I tend to like to have a few extra joints in there. Now, this is for the middle of the body here. Now, keep in mind, I haven't put any bones in yet. So, and this is for the chest region. So the chest, which is really not that flexible, except in rubber people, which is also, you can have a rubber person. That's cool if you want. So if you want your character more rubbery, you can put this chest piece up near the middle. I'm making a more realistic character, so the chest piece is here. I might center this back just a touch. Okay, and then this is my neck base joint. Neck middle, which, it's kind of in the right spot. My head, I want to rotate from up here, kind of at the back of where the jaw would meet. I sort of do it. I've already designed this template to kind of have the right regions where deformations would happen. Something to keep note of too is if you space this out and then you want to move this one up, which I want to do, I want to get it more to the middle, everything else is going to go with it. So you do have to reposition those manually. after. So I tend to like, it's better just to move up the chain, position everything going from the bottom of the chain up, and then you're not going to have to redo everything every time. Don't start at the up and go down. Yeah, if you add clothes, you do need extra bones. No, but you don't need extra structures. The structures are just the armature. So think of the structure as sort of your, if it was stop motion, it's that metal armature. It could be one of those like ball and joint armatures or whatever. So just think of it that way. You will need extra bones as far as like null objects driving pins, but this is nothing to do with actual null objects and pins specifically. This is just purely architecture to hang. You could parent things to these and have your character animated. So another thing with the clavicle, I don't know if you guys know, or they call it the shoulder. I usually put it pretty close to the spine, to the center point here. And again, you want to start with the end of the joint chain. Okay, because see how everything down the chain is going with it. So if I go and position my hand perfectly and get it all set, as soon as I move this bone here, it's going to mess up everybody else. So you just kind of want to do that one at a time. Another thing is I've offset the elbows just a little bit, just so that I get a nice IK solve and it's easy. In this empty rig, I've sort of put the dots right in the middle, but it's probably better that you offset just a tiny bit. If you use one of these empty rigs, you're not going to have to worry about any of that at all. This will all be taken care of. The other thing, it has made me think that I was like kind of thinking, oh, these empty rigs, maybe they're a dumb idea. Who would actually use them? But even being someone who's quite experienced in rigging in After Effects, it has taken me just kind of relearning the process because of Bassel and everything else. And there's other programs out there, like other plugins for rigging, but it's still taken me for this character pretty much a week to rig it up. And I know what I'm doing, and I'm adding little features here and there. I added a breath controller and different like extra features to make it so clothes look a little nicer. So just those little tiny little features have just added on a lot of extra work. So it is a huge time saver for anyone wanting to make stuff. And there is quite a bit to learn in rigging if you're going to try to do this from scratch. And if you're a student trying to make a film, or if you have a client and you have to make something and you don't have time, learning how to rig in After Effects, even with these tools, you're not going to get a rig in 1 or 2 days unless you're just a wizard of some kind. It's going to take you quite a bit of time. And I would hazard to say that it's not really worth it unless you want to specifically learn rigging. The other thing I found is that you position the toe. So I've positioned the foot here, then position the toe. This is like the rotation point for the foot roll, which is here roughly. I've got the little dots on the actual thing. Then do the toe tip. Don't do the heel till last, because I found whenever I move the toe tip, the heel goes with it. So I kept positioning my heel first, kind of working in an order down the chain, and it kept messing me up. So just know that don't do that. I might put this into fast draft. It might work a little better. It won't turn into those giant pixelated blobs. So then I'm going to position this one here. So I'm not going to do all the boning and skinning because it takes way too long. I just want to show a couple of things. So already there's been like 2 little tips. I don't know if you've noticed about things you need to think about. So I'm positioning these. Now the part that takes a really long time is doing the bones for the actual character for the puppet tool. I've also been playing with the new puppet tool features that are in this latest version of CS. And initially, some people were like, they don't work very good. They're kind of gross. They're chunky. But the starching's kind of weird. But I actually have been playing with it a bit, and I really like it. It's not bad. I found the arms are working better. So in my old rig, the arms weren't quite. It was really hard to get a nice overlap and fold. I was losing a lot of volume, and the new puppet tool doesn't lose so much volume on a bending joint. So that's very helpful to know, because what will typically happen is the elbow will crush and get skinny on you. And with the new puppet tool, it doesn't do that as badly. So another thing, so now that we have our structure all in place, this is actually ready for auto rigging, but I'm not going to auto rig it yet because there's other things I need to do. I want to do first. So the other thing that I've done in the actual empty rigs that I'm building is I put all of these into a nested composition. And the reason I'm doing this is because I want to be able to put different artwork inside of these containers so that you can swap them out. I was trying to make it so all you had to do is do it in the Photoshop file, but there's too many things you can mess up. So it's a lot easier if we go like this. I've imported this. One of the things I'm doing too is cleaning up the names, but you guys don't have to do this. I find it a little bit annoying that I have to do this. There's probably a better way. Somebody probably knows a better way to do this, but manually clearing out file names is super annoying to me because it adds the PSD extension to it, which is fine, but I kind of don't want it because the other thing is as soon as I create, let's say like a nested composition, that nested composition has its stupid slash and name on it, which makes it hard to call, just annoying to call up in expressions and stuff. It's just like an added nuisance. So I kind of tend to try to clean this up as much as possible so that the names are clear. Oh yeah, that's the other thing with the structures. Sorry, I forgot to say, is it names things kind of funny with the heel and stuff. So I guess it's assuming that you might have like 20 legs or something. Maybe you're doing a spider, but it says like heel 2, tiptoe 2. So I get rid of this, and if you just press enter, and then I press the shift, the straight line key, and then I'll put LFT for left, and that just keeps me organized. And I don't know if you guys know where that key is. For anyone that's wondering, I don't know if you'll even be able to see it, but it's on my keyboard hard to see, but on mine it's like right by the enter. It's like the backslash. If you press shift backslash, it will, and the backslash is the one that leans this way. It will give you a straight line, which is pretty cool. I've never really used it before, but it's a nice way to visually organize things without having underscores all over the place, because usually I would do something like this, tiptoe underscore left. But it kind of looks, I think it kind of looks nice to have the little line, breaks it up and gives it the sense of a column. So usually what I do is I'll put that in and then I'll go left. Usually copy and paste this, like copy that little end extension there and just delete it. And then I can move a little bit faster. Whoops. Monk. Okay. So I don't want to like do too much here. So, and again, the back heel and the right leg doesn't have an extension or a definition to it. So I will just put that in. But I don't want to spend too much time on that. I want to keep moving. So that's just it's just like a little process thing. So the next step is to get back to these is to put these into nested compositions. So what you can do is if you've cleaned up the name on all of them, in fact, I would probably, because I wouldn't leave the guide in there either. I just want arm left, arm right. And I already did that in my proper rig, but just select all of them and drag them onto this guy here. And then you say multiple compositions. And by default, it's going to make the compositions 2 seconds each. And I want them at something like 5 minutes. So 1, 2, 3, 4. So 50,000 will give us 5 minutes. So then each one of these will be a nested 5-minute clip. So you see, and then your little comp will be perfectly in there. So now that that's done, it adds a 2 to all of them. That should be fixed. You should get rid of those. You don't want 2s on everything. Sometimes I'll just call it like an extension like comp or something. And that way when I'm searching for it or something like that, I know what it is. And that's obviously it's like the nested comp version. The other thing I like to do is to then take this, like these are the layers, and then I'll create a similar folder, like copy this name, paste it, and then I'll call these like comps, or I might call them nested comps or whatever. And then that way I can put all these in here so that if I'm having to rename stuff or I'm trying to find something or I'm having to go through and do some repetitive task, I'm not having to, it's just less to deal with. They're all just clearly right there. So then what I do is I would replace all these with comps. So arm left, comp. You see it'll just drop it right in. It won't do anything weird for you. Hand left, guide. So let's just go hand left, and it would be this comp one. So the nice thing about this is when you're in here, if you had multiple drawings for an arm or something, you could stack them all up and do things all inside of here, and it won't break your puppet tool. As long as as soon as we create a puppet tool on this to create something that's bendable, it's going to create an alpha that cuts out the actual existing layer. You could just have it cut out a square, but I like to have it cut out this. And then once that's done, and everything's going to live inside of that. So we'll just go here to the arm left. So I'm just going to add a puppet pin right now. And this is where things get a little bit time consuming. So I'm not going to spend too much time on this. But this is where one of my big things I ran into, became a bit of a problem. Here, just give me a sec. I'm going to close this. Oh, no, it's fine. It's gone now. Through the window, it's loud. So let's put in our puppet pin. Density and everything's fine. I have this expansion set to 6. Density, I don't know exactly what all those do. It's part of the new puppet tool interface. So I'm putting one up at the top and one at the bottom, two at the top corners. And this is so that I can create a more realistic shoulder that moves a little more naturally and I can control it better. I'll put one here. Actually, I'll put it right on the structure there. And then I'll put another pin here and here. So then I've got these pins. This also allows me to create a nicer wrist. Like if I want some padding on the wrist, so if there's like a big sleeve or something, I can make it so it only moves a little bit versus a lot by putting these 2 pins. So I get better control over my rotations. So we're just going to focus, I think, on just the arm, and I suppose I'll do the hand since it also has a composition. And again, the same thing with the hand is I'll put a pin here, I'll put a pin here, I'll put one in the middle because I'm putting a fold in and a fold here. Could probably reduce the mesh density on this one. So let's put this one down to 5 because it's not going to be doing that much. So that's where we can reduce the density. Expansion, I think, is how far it moves off of the edges, which I think it maybe would used to always be called, or no, I don't remember what it was called before. Yeah, it was probably called expansion. I can't recall for some reason. I'm blanking. And the other thing I do is put it on transparent. So that just makes sure that if there's anything sticking out of the layer, it kind of gets rid of it so it's not floating around when you've animated. So I guess I can show you what that looks like. I'll just take this. I'll duplicate this layer and put it over here. And if we go back here, if it's not on transparent like that, you'll see that little piece there. And as soon as you move it, that little piece will always stay there. So if you've not done a super good job cleaning up your layers or something, you kind of want to have it on transparent. You want to do it anyway, especially if you're using this template idea. Okay, so that's one thing. Now, Duik has a bunch of built-in features. So we've created our structures. So now we can move on. Oh, additionally, in this edit place, you can set the bones and do other things with them. So right here, as you can basically tell them to bake the look of the bones, because right now when the bones are dynamic and you can reposition these, it's a shape layer that's active. So these are like shape layers in After Effects that they're redrawing themselves all the time, and that takes a certain amount of computing power. So if these remain active once your character is fully rigged, it will slow down your rig even more. And this stuff's stacking up as you get hundreds and hundreds of layers, or like over 100 layers for sure. It's going to start slowing everything down. But we're not going to worry about that yet because there is a bake feature when you do the actual rig. Okay, so I'm just going to lock these really quick so I don't accidentally move them. All right, and so we've done the wrist. We've done the hand. We've added the puppet pins. So now we want to make bones. So usually what I do, and I know everybody has a different take on whether to do this or not, but usually I name the pins just to keep it a little bit easier to manage in my brain. And also if I have to troubleshoot some coding or something. If you're really new at After Effects, I wouldn't bother. There's no point because you're not going to be getting into the scripting and trying to fix stuff. But this one I would call it arm, left, wrist, back, right? I try to be pretty descriptive. This is the part that takes me pretty long. But it's a bit of a process for me just to make sure that I can fix stuff if there's something wrong and I'm not digging through 100 objects named pin. So that's the main thing. So then, and I try to be descriptive about what it is. So first I say it's on the arm, and then I say it's the left arm, and then I say, like, for this instance, it would be the shoulder, and it would be FRNT. And this is important because these will be how I identify when I'm having to do my parenting. I just know what to look at. I don't have to look at the actual object and see what layer number it is. I know what it's called, so it makes it a bit easier to run through and try to find out what things should be linked to. So I've named this now, and we'll name the other part of this here. Whoops. If you just press U on the actual layer, it should just bring up the animated attributes, and that when you put a pin in, it automatically gets a keyframe. So if you press U, you can find the pins really quickly. So for the same thing here, hand, left, wrist, FRNT, because it's front facing. It's facing to the front of the character. Hand, left, wrist, BCK. I really should just copy this and paste it. And this one I just call hand, left, and I might just call this like palm, or I would call it hand, whatever you want. Just keeping the naming for me. Hand, wrist, hand, left, and then this I might call fingers, or you could call end, whatever you want. Okay, so now that I've done this, I can generate some bones. Now, this is the other thing, is while you're building, before you commit to things, it's really important to save in steps. So you can see that I save these different steps. I might even name them properly. Like this one, each one of these steps is before doing a major thing that's a little bit, it's irreversible. It's difficult to undo something. So if I rig and bake the spine, for instance, I can't easily go back and get that structure back. So sometimes it's better just to have a file that you can go back on just in case you get a bug or something goes wrong. So usually at this stage, before I start rigging, so I'll have gone through and put the pins on everything. And then once I start rigging, before I start doing the actual rig, I will save a new file for sure. Like I'll save a file once I have the structure in place, and I'll save that. And then I'll save a new file to start working on that. So this one, for instance, I would save as like, whatever, 001. And then now I would save a new one. So I'd go Control-Shift-S, and I would call this one 002. And I know in 001, the structure wasn't finished yet. And I hadn't done any, it was finished, but I hadn't done any rigging. Okay, so now we have the pins. Now what we're going to do is we're going to create some bones for these. So you can just select all the things that you have pins on. And if we go here, we can add some bones. And so if you click this little circle, you can get some of the different settings. So right now it's going to make a purple bone. And I'm just going to make it, create it right away. So then what it does is it adds these giant pin icons, which are cool. But again, they take up processing power. And this is what I didn't realize in the last rig I built, is that these things will eat up a lot of computational power on you. Not a lot, but enough to cause a problem eventually. So the first thing you want to do is I just resize them, make them small, because I'm not going to be controlling them a lot. And then I'll just, you could change the color if you want here. It's really up to you. So let's say I change the color to a slightly different color. And then I just like Control C, and then I paste this on all the bone layers, and instead of manually moving them, because you can't seem to group edit them. So now that those are all, let's say they're all finished, I got my pins the way I want them. Now this is the part that really messed me up. Just this morning, I'd finished everything and none of my pins worked anymore, and I couldn't figure out why they stopped working. So I'll show you what happens. So let's say we're happy with the pins, everything's all good. And what we want to do is we want to bake them. So everything in the new Bassel, if it creates a shape layer, so far that I've found, is that you can do a bake. And what the bake does is, like it says here, removes expressions and effect for controlling the appearance of a bone. This will improve performance a little bit. So you know that's going to get rid of this expression link between the color of the fill color and also the scaling, because what it's doing is it's created an expression that goes into the shape layer attributes, so inside the contents here. And it will actually, it's linked to the transform scale, and it's linked to the fill color right here. And just those two expressions can add a little bit of weight to the problem. Or it's just another thing that has to be computed. So any place you can get rid of those things, the better. So what you can do is you can select all of these. So if I select all the bones, and I say let's remove the expressions for controlling this. So that will break the connection between the bones. Actually, let's just turn off the structures for now so we can see what we're doing. That removes the connection between the bones and the actual shape layer itself. I think it's still a shape layer. It just doesn't have expressions on it, which is totally fine, because if you want to change the fill, you want to go back on it, you can just do it right here. You don't need really this connection. The only thing that really messed me up, though, is this. Now that I've done this, I'm getting this error, and it's telling me that this expression is messed up. And what I first looked at, I'm like, oh, well, this is just a color thing to change the color from the main composition. So let's just undo here. I think I can undo this, what I just did. We'll see. Okay, I believe I just undid. No, I didn't. Or we undid. Oh, no. I don't know if I can undo what I did. Let's just redo paste. It may not matter. I'm just double checking here. Are these active still? Yes, they're still active. Okay, So let's say we have this pin right here. I can change the color here, I believe. I may be able to still do it. Yeah, it changed. I know it's hard to see because everything's so fuzzy. Let me just put this, I'll put this from custom. I'll put it to quarter. That'll make it a little clearer. Sorry about that, guys. Okay, so I can change the color here, but I think I can also do something here. I'm not really sure what this is about. Initially, I wasn't sure what this was about. So what I thought mistakenly was that this was for changing colors of bones, but it has nothing to do with anything like that. What it has to do with is it actually is this is a list that's being referenced in the actual puppet, the puppet tool here. So every one of these pins is basically being told to follow a bone. And that's how you create these little bones, like they're being told to follow this shape layer. But it's not actually following the shape layer. It's looking here to this effect and telling it which one to follow, right? So it's not actually, so if you, this is the thing, this is the problem I ran into, is so I cleaned up these bones. I'm sorry if this is confusing. I baked them, right? And I'm going to bake these one. You're going to see the effect is going to disappear on all these once I bake them. And I'm like, okay, great, cool, that's done. Wait, now I've got this dumb error. Oh, I guess it doesn't need this because I made the false assumption that this had to do with the color of the bone, because it's saying it can't find the thing that's telling the color of the bone what it is, because it was looking at the color effector right in here somewhere or something. So what I did is I deleted these, or I did this. I included this layer in my bake. And what happened as soon as I did that, I don't know if it'll do it again actually, if I bake this all. As soon as I did that anyways, I did that bake. Let's just see if it did it or not. Yeah, there we go. Oh, no, it didn't. It worked. But if I included that in my bake process, let me see if I can go back. Sorry, guys. I know this is like kind of annoying, but it's kind of important. Okay, so I've got these bones. They're back to normal. If I include this in my bake, maybe it won't do it this time. Maybe I'm going crazy. But what happened is that's still working. This stopped working. These pins stopped working. So I also did this dumbly another time. I'm like, oh, I don't need these anymore. I deleted them. Okay, great. Error's gone. Well, guess what? Your pins don't work anymore, because that was telling it what to follow, right? Each one of these is saying follow this layer, right? So right here, arm left, wrist back is being told to follow bone, arm left, wrist back. I could switch it to follow the front bone. So it's cool because you can make new bones and tell them where to go just through this drop-down list. But you probably want to get rid of this error because it's a little bit stressful to see an error all the time. So basically what you want to do, and sorry for the long ramble to get to this point, is you want to go to, I just go like this. I've been doing this morning anyway, is I'll click on these and I'll just alt-click the bone color. And that'll get rid of the error. And I think, did I bake this one out? No, I didn't. So we'll just do this. We'll just do the bake thing. We'll get an error. We should get an error. There we go. And I just will alt-click on the bone color, deleting that expression. So it's no longer a thing. So now when I grab my bones, hopefully they still work. Yeah, they work. And now I don't have any errors on anything. So those are like two big things. That's another big thing figured out. That's pretty helpful to know. The other thing is, like, let's say you're doing, if you want to just do like a straight up puppet, we're almost there, especially for this arm. Now it's just a matter of parenting everything properly. So the wrist, front, and back. I would suggest, though, parenting stuff after you've done your actual rig, because sometimes what happens for the IK solves on the legs and stuff, you'll get these crazy rotation values because it'll flip something all over the place. So this is the other thing. Don't parent your puppet pins and stuff yet. Process your rig first, the rig on the structures. Get it to build the rig first, because some of these guys will go from having a 0 rotation value to having something like 180 degrees, or 3. It'll be flipped in some weird way, and it won't make sense, but it's part of what's happening to make the IK solve work. And we've run into this before on the stream, and I'll show you more about that in the bigger tutorial. But to avoid any problems, I just do run the auto rig first. So you just select all the layers you want to include in it. Sometimes what I've been doing is locking things, locking everything else. And then you just go to the back here. Let me go to auto rig. Now, I'm not 100% sure exactly what this means, other than I would assume I found things worked a little bit better for my purposes if I preferred an FK overlap. And I'm pretty sure that that's just sort of, I haven't even read the instruction manual on what that means, so I don't want to speak to it at all. But it's probably how it favors doing the solve of different joints. And it would depend on what you're doing. So a spine, you'd probably want to prefer just a Bezier, like Bezier IK, depending on the type of character. And if you're going to rig the whole character at once, this was the default setting, so I left it. The other thing here is this will bake structures. And this is assuming you're not going to go back in and try to fix something, which I would suggest not doing. If you need to fix something in the rig, the best thing to do is disconnect everything and delete the thing that's broken. And it sucks. There's not really an easy way to do this, but it's kind of annoying. You can tell it to bake the structures here, or if you don't want to bake them here because you might want to change something, you can always bake them here in the, is it the edit? Yeah, you can just select the structures you want and bake them there. So it's really up to you. This is a bit cleaner. Oh, the other thing I should let you know, some of these options aren't even visible. If you go into settings, I'm in expert mode, I'm in normal, and then I'm in expert. But if it's in rookie or standard, some of those features, you can't see all of them. So that's another thing to keep in mind. It took me a while to find this because everything was really simple and I couldn't figure out how to get at anything. And it's because I was in baby mode, because I think by default it is. Okay, so anyways, now that we have all our structures selected, I'm not sure if you have to even select them all. I think it's probably smart enough to recognize the S here. I just select them all by default. I guess we could try to unselect them and see what happens. Does it do anything? No, have to be selected. Okay, so then I'm just going to go auto rig, and then we'll just let it go. So now we'll have our rig all set up. Everything should be working properly. It's actually quite a complex thing that they've done here. Now the main thing you'll find is that the structures won't follow each other anymore. See? They're all baked down. They're not changeable. So this, again, will help your performance. Any kind of performance issues you may be having. Let's put this, I don't know why I went back. Oh, yeah, because I undid. So we'll put this to half. Sorry, guys. It's so ugly looking. Anyways, so the rig is all put together. But right now, because you don't have anything rigged up, all you're going to see is the main structures moving. Right? See how slow it is? It's just slow. It's just slow. If I put it in adaptive, I think it works a little bit better. Like I can at least see what's going on. Really depends what you're doing. And I'll drop the resolution down to quarter because there's no need for it to be that big. Okay. So now what I want to do is I want to parent my pins to the structures. And that's kind of what the structures are for. You could parent a whole layer to the structure. So let's say you didn't have puppet pins on something and I just have this head, for instance. You could just parent it to the head structure. And that's just like if you're doing a really simple cutout character. Now, I might just turn these structures off for a moment because they're a little bit distracting. Because I keep wanting to grab them. Really, you want to just grab the head icon. But you see it parented over. If I have the neck guide, for instance, I didn't put any puppet pins on it, so I could just put it on the neck. So if you want to do a really simple rig, this is the way to do it. You don't need to do puppet pins or anything. But because we have puppet pins and we're doing some distortion-y stuff, what I want to do is I want to actually parent my pins to the structures. So these are the little bones here. So I'll turn them off the lock here. And let's just start with the wrist back and front. These two I will just parent to the actual hand. And because we didn't rename them properly, it's kind of annoying because I don't know which one is hand two. Is hand two the right or the left hand? I don't know. So I need to kind of look, and I guessed right, so that's good. And then I have on my hand, I actually put multiple bones, right? Because I wanted to maybe be able to bend my hand a little bit. Now you could have built a claw into your structure. That would have done the same thing. Actually, sorry, we're on the wrist. All right, so let's just do the elbow. So we'll go to structure, and this I'll do the forearm. Again, this is probably forearm number 2. Yep. And then and then I will do the 2 shoulders here. And then this one, well, we could do it 2 ways. This actually, we should probably just parent them because of this. I'm not putting the buffers on yet. Let's just parent them to the actual arm. This is probably arm 2, not to the shoulder because the shoulder is the clavicle. So now what should happen is we should at least see our thing following, but you see it kind of looks like rubbery and messy, which is okay. It should probably be stretchy too. There we go. You can see it stretching out, which is cool. So we're going to go in and we'll fix that up really quick, but let's just put the hand on there. So I have the fingers and the palm. Now I don't have a controller for the palm. There's no controller that came with it. So what I can also do in Duik Bassel is create a controller. So I want to just create a little rotation controller for this guy, bonk, and that'll automatically create a controller. And I can rename it, of course. It doesn't matter. The expressions will update. Well, it doesn't have any expressions right now. LFT palm. Okay, we'll just call it that. And then what I can do for this is I'll just parent my fingers to the palm controller. Or actually, let's parent them just to the palm. And then this palm will parent to the palm here. I try not to use expressions unless I have to, because I feel like expressions just slow things down. Now this, I could either parent to the hand, or if I wanted it not to rotate, I could parent it to the arm or forearm too. So I'll show you the difference. Let's have a quick look. So here, if I rotate the hand, because I haven't it parented to the forearm, oops, actually I haven't parented, sorry guys. This is hand parented to the bone. This one this should not be parented to the controller. Sorry, that's my bad. It should actually be parented to the structure. Sorry about that. So hand 2. Otherwise, it's not going to move anywhere because it's trying to follow something that's not being controlled. So you see that? So you see how those pins are staying behind on the top of the hand? That's because they're parented to the actual arm bone. So this guy right here. If I want them to move with the hand, I just have to make sure that they're parented to the structure. So it really depends on the kind of style of animation you're doing. So this one, I would parent it to the actual hand structure. So it'd be hand 2. So if we do that, the result will be a little bit different. You'll see those pins will move with the wrist. Okay, so that's all good. I'll show you really quick why I do buffers. Like, you see this mess that's happening? I don't know if it's hard to see. Let's just turn off the structures for now, and I'll show you guys. We'll just turn these off. Bonk. There you go. And actually, maybe we'll make all these guys more opaque. So let's do this and make their transparency 100%. So it's a little easier to see what's going on. So you see all this like crunching and flipping that's happening? That's really normal because the pins are trying to stay 100% down. This is okay because normally you wouldn't really animate with a hand completely like this. So if you see if I'm rotating it up, it's fixing the problem a little bit. But this is why I put buffers, these little buffer things, I call them buffers in, just to solve problems like this, especially with clothing. So let's just put that hand back. Now the other thing is if you're going to start experimenting with your rig, you want to make sure, do this with keyframes because there's no, at least not I'm aware of, there might be a way to zero things. You see how far I had to step back to get that back? There may be something in posing animation in rigs. If we were to go, I don't know, to zero the position back out to the original. I don't know if there is. Anyways, the best practice if you're going to start messing around with stuff is to keyframe the position because you can't zero it out. Like look at the starting positions right here. It's these numbers. You're never going to remember that. So it's better to keyframe here. Hey, Migmigson. Oh, great. So this will be helpful for you. Oh, sorry. Yeah, so that should be helpful. Thanks, Ajay. I'm not sure if I'm saying your name right. Thanks for checking us out. So anyways, where was I? Yeah, so your hand, make sure you keyframe first and then move ahead a few frames and then start moving stuff around. And then that way you'll be able to see, it's very valuable because you can just easily go back to whatever it was. You can just do it between one frame if you want. You don't have to have like 7 seconds. I don't have 7 because I'm looking at the whole composition. It could just be between a couple of frames and then using page down or page up, you can step through and see what's actually happening. So we do that in 3D all the time too. That's the way we work. So anyways, so we've done that. we've got the wrist. Everything's kind of rigged up. This is essentially you've now done your arm rig. Everything's fine. There's some other options in the. I can't remember what I was going to tell you guys, but it doesn't matter. There's some other options in here that you can play with. The IK being enabled or disabled. So if you disable it, you're then going to be using the FK controls. And I think, where is FK? That's right here somewhere. Follow through. I don't know what follow through and overlap is. I'm not even remotely sure what that is. But it's something. This is all interesting. I haven't played with any of this stuff, so you guys will have to. I'm not sure if it's like some kind of automated thing to like kind of create secondary motion and stuff like that. I'm not sure. So you guys like. I haven't played with it yet, so sorry I can't speak to it yet. And I have not read the manual yet either, so keep that in mind. This is just going off of what I've experienced so far. I'm trying to remember where the FK controls are, because with the FK, you should be able to, what is it? You should just be able to rotate each layer at a time, which I would assume it would be up here, but I'm not seeing it. Individual controls, here we go. So you would animate it this way. Now, if you're really clever with your rigging, what you could do is you could add FK controllers that are essentially just null objects that sit out here that will turn on and off whether or not you're doing FK. But yeah, so Ashur, is it Ashur? Sayadi or Sadi? Maybe I'm sorry if I'm butchering your name. What do you mean like doing the overlap? Is it like the secondary motion of like if a character's walking, you sort of get the swing of the arm kind of thing? If you can just let me know, I'm just curious about it because I actually don't know. Okay, so we'll just re-enable the IK because this is kind of not really my expertise. I'm not animating yet, and I will definitely follow up once I'm doing some animation and help you guys with that. Oh, okay, perfect. That's what I kind of assumed it was for. So we got to fix some of this mess. Like, see, this is not bending very nicely. So let's go here, and the best way to do that is to pose your arm where it needs to be. And then fix it. The other thing I want to do is I'm just going to rotate the hand. Now, because the rotations do zero out, like they start at 0, you don't necessarily need to create a keyframe for them. It can be helpful, but it's really up to you. Let's just, sorry, I got to turn this opacity back up. And then I'll isolate these two layers so I can actually see what's happening. So it's not bending very nice. Yeah, I think you're right. You do need keyframes active for that to actually work. You're right. Because it uses a start at time reference point. And if you don't have a keyframe, it's got nothing to reference as a first key to know whether something's changed position. Okay, because they don't want it acting on when things aren't animated. So what you usually do, at least in my experience, is you would create a value at time 0, which understands where things start. Okay, so anyways, there's a couple things to sort out here. First is one thing is the way the actual composition is positioned. Now, what's interesting with the new puppet tool is it used to be when you rotated your layer, everything would go wonky, and now they've fixed that. I think there's like a layer compensation, mesh rotation refinement feature here. I think that has something to do with that. I'm not sure. But one of my common practices used to be in the old puppet tool was to link the actual mesh to something that I wanted to deform the least. So if I want the arm to be strong, like stable when the arm's rotating, I don't want a bunch of weird stuff to happen, like bending in the arm and stuff, the forearm to be strong, and I didn't mind if the elbow moved around a bit, you could then just parent the main comp to, let's say, like the forearm or something. So we'll do it to forearm 2. And you'll see that the dotted line, as the arm moves, those 4 dots, the composition has fully rotated over here, which in the old puppet tool would cause a lot of distortion in your shoulder. But sometimes that could be desirable because it made the shoulder feel a little more organic and like it was changing shape. So that's just one thing to do. You don't really want these not having a parent. Like, you don't want these comps just floating around as your character moves all over the place. Otherwise, it just could create issues, especially in the old puppet tool. I'm not so much sure with this new one, but you just don't want them floating around. The other thing is if they're not parented, when you're animating your character, they're just like moving all over. They just stay behind. Your character's moved all over, and the actual original mesh is way back there somewhere, at least the reference point. So that being said, now let's fix these bends. And I'm using the new puppet tool. So starch is different. It's kind of weird. Also, make sure, at least this is another thing I found out, make sure you actually have the puppet tool selected before you start doing your starching, because what I found is it will just add a new mesh if you don't. So the best thing to do is to select the puppet and select the mesh before you start adding anything else, because I found it just created a new mesh sometimes, which was a little bit annoying. You know what? As far as whether I preferred it or not, I don't know. I've only just done one rig with it, and I liked how it held volume better. So I'm going to show you, I could show you the difference between the two, but what you do with the starch, instead of starch having like a big radius or anything like that, they kind of just create a mesh, a resolution on the mesh. So what I'm trying to do is I want to stabilize certain regions of the pins, and mostly around where the pins are. And like I also want to stabilize that forearm a little bit so it holds its shape better. So I'm not sure, no, it won't let me pull them around, but wherever you put pins, it kind of creates more structure. So I think we can just delete them if we don't want them, but you can't slide and move them around like you used to. But I have found, again, like I was saying, the volume preservation is much better. So here you see, like, we don't have this elbow that's collapsed on itself the way things normally would. And I think we only need one guy here maybe just to hold that together a bit. This one definitely needs two. We could put one in the elbow, but I feel like that might just make it, I like the elbow to crush a little bit. So maybe you just have to experiment. And the best way to experiment is to pose the arm in kind of a more extreme position, and that will allow you to get the feel you're looking for. I'm just checking a couple things. I don't want a round elbow at all. That's okay. I'm not sure if it's necessary. Now, I don't like to do too much starch because what can happen is things can start looking really stiff. And so unless you're doing a robot or something, it's better if there's a little bit of give and flexibility to it, because things will just feel a little more natural because you're hiding the rigidness of the cutout process, right? So as the arm's bending, it's changing shape a little bit, which gives the illusion that it's fleshy. So I tend to try to embrace that a little bit. Okay, so let's pull. So I don't mind some distortion. It's actually can be to your benefit. So let's just turn these guys back on, and we'll pull this arm even a little further, because what I want to see is the overlap. So see, it's actually pretty nice. Like I'm finding that was a lot easier to achieve than when I'm fighting with the old starch tool, which would create really hard edges. This is a little bit nicer, and I would say so far for limbs, like you notice the volume isn't crushing too badly. So that arm is feeling a lot nicer, and it's collapsing on itself nicer. And I'm having to do less work to make that happen. So now what we can add to the final stage of the mesh is, again, let's make sure the mesh is selected, and we'll do we'll do the overlap. It's a bit unnecessary in this specific case because I want the arm to come over front, but let's say I wanted it to come over the back. What did I do? Maybe I have to do it right here. I'm trying to put the overlap, but the arm's way over here. Let's just go back here and see if I can do this. Mesh. I had it selected, but it disappeared. There we go. So let's say I wanted this part of the arm to be in front. Maybe we'll go like this. Now I could use lots of different overlap pins and just reduce the extent. But I don't really care. And this is at 50%, which means that it will overlap anything. Like as you add more, they get to kind of add it together. So if I had one here and this one was at, let's say 40% even, it would be this one will overlap the 40% one. So it makes it so you can kind of do various gradations of overlap. So now what should happen is when we get this overlap section there, now you'll see that this arm is coming in front, the top of the arm. And what's cool about this is because we've animated it, I can adjust this if I'm not quite getting the result I want, and see if it helps to change or shift things around a little bit. I'm not seeing any dramatic change here, but if I put this over here, we would definitely get a change. Like the line will disappear and it will try to put the other guy in front. So anyways, that's usually what I do. I do that for elbows, for arms, for legs and arms. The torso a little bit, depending on how crazy I pull the torso. But so that arm I would say is finished. Now I'm going to show you really quick before I sign out of here. I'm just going to show you the buffer thing that I do, which kind of helps with the wrist. So let's just do this. We'll keyframe this and we'll just put this arm back to these frames here. Let's copy and paste them. And then I'm going to just rotate the wrist really extremely. Well, not extremely, but just, I'll do it like this. Okay. And then I'll put it back the other way. Bum, 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 bum. And I'm just using the number pad on my keyboard. So the way this is moving is it feels like the sleeve is glued on to the arm. And I'd like to try to I'd like to avoid that feeling. So usually what I will do is I'll create like a little null object. Okay. And I would call this, let's say we'll call it arm, left, wrist, or I guess we could just call it wrist, LFT, and I call it buffer. It can be whatever you want. And then if you do this, you go, I just learned this, someone told me on the stream the other day, and I can't remember her name. But then if you just shift select, so I'm going to go to S hand 2, bonk, and I shift parent, it'll automatically parent and go lock to the spot. And I want this parented to the hand. So now what happens is if the hand is rotating, my little null object should go with it. So you see it's going with it, which is great. So now what I wanted to do is I'm going to use a really simple, super simple expression. And I'm going to say that I'm just putting value minus the parent dot rotation. I think this should work times 0.5 or something. So what that'll do is as the actual wrist rotates, you'll see that the control, the hand rotation is at 64 and this one's at 32. So you're getting like a bit of a different, like see, you notice how you're getting a little bit more of a natural feeling in the wrist rotation because it feels like the wrist is moving a bit beyond the fabric. Okay, and that can be really cool because you get kind of this compression thing happening, right? So I've just built that in, that's fine. Now in the actual empty rigs that I'm putting together for people to buy or use or whatever, instead of having this equation like this, I've got also another thing going on. So on the buffer itself, we've put in like a slider control, and then I'll just put this to 0.5 for instance, and then I'll say buffer AMNT or whatever. That's, and I just grab this here. And then instead of doing times 0.5, we just go times buffer AMNT. And then that means that you don't ever have to touch this thing again if you don't want to. You can just like lock it. Or you can't lock it because you have to, you can just hide it. You don't have to look at it. All you have to do is play with this. You don't have to go into the script or anything if you don't like the results. And that also means that you can animate this separately. So if you wanted the, you know what's funny is I don't think what I even did was, well, anyways, it doesn't matter. I don't think what I did anything. I was like sitting there saying, oh, look at how the arms are moving. The wrist is moving better, but I will show you. I actually don't know if Colin's released any of his scripts at all yet. I don't know. I know that we're going to release the layer sorter, but as far as like Colin's parental guidance or anything, I don't know if he's put them out yet. Okay, so this, I made a mistake. I was like, look how good this looks, but it actually was looking exactly the way it was looking before. I'm sorry. Because what I haven't done is I have the buffer, and the buffer is working, right? It's at 24 degrees, it's at 48, but I haven't parented the pins to it. So that's the last step is you want to take the wrist front and back. This will change the look of it. And I want to parent that to the buffer. Okay, so now when it's rotating, it should look different. And it might even look bad because I might have too much. So you see here how it's slipping right out of the wrist socket. So that just means I have too much on the buffer. So sorry for that. So we'll put it to 0.25. And the other nice thing about this is I could animate this value, right? So if I want, you could even tie expressions to it, but if I want the the wrist to move very little as it just first starts, and then the buffer to go up, you could do that. So you could keyframe the buffer here. Whoops, not rotation. We want to keyframe the slider. And then as the wrist is moving up, we increase this or decrease it to like 0 or something. And then it's just a nice way to add like a little extra believability to your characters and actually make them feel a little more organic. And you can do that. I also do it to the shoulders. Let's just put this to 0.2. I do it to the shoulders as well so that the shoulders don't feel so cut out. And I'll show you that really quickly. I'm going to have to stop soon. I'm just about done here, but I will show you, let's say, on the shoulder. I'll just turn the torso on so we can see it. But right now, when the arm moves, the shoulder really just kind of slides all over the place, right? So again, if we take one of these buffers, and now that I've put the code in, and because also if you look at the expression, instead of referencing a specific layer, all I've done is, all I've done is actually, I'm referencing the parent. So I can duplicate this really easily, rename it. So we'll call this shoulder, but usually here I'd call it arm LFT, because this is the buffer for the arm. I might have a different buffer for the actual shoulder or for the torso shoulder. Arm left buffer, just like that. Okay. And then we can just move this, or you don't even have to move it. We'll just go like this. We'll parent it to the upper arm. So we'll press shift and we'll go arm 2, bonk. And it should just parent straight there. It's all good. It's exactly what we want. And I believe we even already have a value on it. So let's just put it to 0.5 for now. I'm going to turn off the animation on it and 0.5. And then what we want to do is we want to parent the two shoulders to the buffer. Okay. So let's parent it to the arm left buffer. Now what will happen is as we move this, the shoulder is going to rotate a little bit less. And this can make a huge difference in the way a character feels. So if we even put that, let's see if we just put the buffer up even more. It could, I mean, there's a point where it could look bad. But I kind of like it depending on what the character is. So you see now that shoulder isn't sliding off the figure so badly. So let's put this back because I'm in frame 1. I'm breaking my own rules. It should be right here. So let's put it to 0, and I'll show you what it moves like at 0, and you'll see. I think you'll really easily see the difference. So you see how that's just moving around, almost like it's a robot joint, a robot hinge. So obviously we put the buffer on to let's do 0.8, so it's quite rigid. So it's really locking that shoulder in place. And now you see it's got a little more deformation and life to it, right? So, and the other thing you can do with these buffers, which is cool, is you could animate their position. So it can give you another option in a way to control how parts of the puppet move in your last pass of animation, or if you want to do anything else to them, because ultimately the pins are parented to them and they're parented to the actual structures. So that's kind of, I don't know, that's kind of just a rough look at the general ideas behind what I'm doing on the empty rigs. And this is what I've learned so far working with Bassel. The other thing I found, which was really cool, is it's got an auto walk animation, I think. It can generate a walk cycle for you. So you can you just tell it, I think it'll auto fill it if you have the joints named properly, and it'll automatically generate a walk cycle for you. I didn't find, and I could be for some other reason, I don't know why, but I didn't find that the animation for a character that's at an angle worked very well because it was neglecting one of the legs. One of the legs didn't move that well, and that could be because of the way I have buffers and I have all this other stuff involved. But so I think once the rig is all fleshed out and I've got a million different things going on, the chances of something like an auto walk cycle generator actually working are potentially less likely. It's hard to say, but I think it follows primarily controllers. So, see, I'm not sure how this dropper thing works. Yeah, I think it does look like it'll auto-populate neck and shoulders. I guess what do we do? Oh, I see. You have this selected like this, and you go like that. Oh no, that doesn't work. Use that one. It's a little weird. Neck and shoulders, hips are here. So it really only cares about the controllers, I guess. Hips, okay. And then body. This isn't going to work because we don't, not on our actual character because we don't have anything rigged up yet. Right hand. Oh, not that one, obviously. So that would be hand 2. Hand 1 would be our right hand. There we go. And right foot. Where's the left hand? Oh, okay, right. So it figured that out by itself. The right foot controller is here. Well, maybe it would work because it's only just driving the controllers. There's a foot left, so that would be, this one would be the right foot. Okay. I didn't auto-populate that one. Okay, so also let's remove any animation that's sitting on top because I'm not really sure what that does. So let's get rid of all of our animation. Boop. Okay. And let's just see what happens. Okay, it did something. Let's press play. It only seemed to do it to the arm and the hand. Is that possible because the arm and the hand, or maybe I had them locked? Is it because I had the structure? No, or the controls aren't locked. Do I have to select all of the controllers and do it maybe? Walk cycle. It's weird that you would have to do that, but maybe let's see. Oh, I saw everything move. Okay, there you go. You just have to have everything selected. Oh, that walk cycle is not so bad. The only thing I found is that I didn't feel like the reach was very good, but I think you can modify. Yeah, you can modify all the properties. So there is a walk cycle controller now that's been created right here, and you can just sort of change the parameters. Character. Well, that's the character setting, so you can change its height and stuff. Which, I mean, I wonder. Well, the weight. I guess the weight would make him walk differently. I suppose. Maybe his feet stay planted longer, and he takes. I don't know. Does that feel different? Secondary controls. Let's do feet, and let's see. Feet rotation. What does that do? Well, I guess it doesn't. I don't know. You kind of have to experiment with these. It would be how much I suppose the feet rotate. It's very like the animation is pretty rigid in some ways, but I guess it's a good start. And yeah, Pramod, I'm going to record an animation tutorial, but I'm not doing that today. So we've taken a look at him, and you can see how he's sort of working with our settings. And additionally, because our controls, we're not changing coding on the controls specifically. It seems to work. My only concern is that I also add some stuff to the controllers. And now that these have expressions on it, it has a walk cycle on it. Oh, that's not so bad. It can make it trickier. It might break some of my controls. I'm not sure. Sorry, guys. My head is starting to feel like madness. I have glasses and these microphones stuck to my face. Anyways, so I hope that's like been informative. That's useful and maybe useful for reference until I can get a proper tutorial up. But that's kind of the basics. That's how I'm working through a lot of stuff here. And these empty rigs will work better, I think. So I think that's it. I guess that's it. I don't know if you guys have any questions. So for me now, I'm going through. I'll just tell you where we're going on my rig. For this character, you can see there's a lot of stuff going on, and I'm just relinking all this stuff right now. I've re-rigged the entire character. Everything's put back to the way it needs to be, and the way this is going to work is that this character is all set up. Actually, I'll just show you really quick because it's. Originally, I was trying to do everything that you could just re-link the Photoshop file, like I think I said earlier, and that the character would automatically replace itself. But that's not what I'm doing anymore because I've decided that you probably just want to be able to import something. So the way this character works now is if I go import a character and I have this character, this chippy character I'm calling him. We'll just bring in composition retain sizes. Again, this is another thing too. I forgot to say, when you're bringing your rigs in, I find it's better. I think it's less processor heavy if you tell it to retain the layer sizes. I was in the previous rig. What I was doing is I had these nested embedded compositions, and you had these giant comps everywhere, like this one. So watch, if I pull the arm, it moves slow, but look at it's moving this giant composition here, and it's because inside of this I had a nested comp, and you can see the arm bend too. This is how the arm bend is working with the old starch, and it took me a lot to maintain that, and I'm getting a really insane line here. I don't mind the overlap, it's kind of cool, but I get this weird line here and it's not going to look as good. But anyways, what was I going to say? In this specific rig, you're moving a giant composition, and I feel like it must be more memory heavy or something, even though the composition is largely empty. And so you've got, let's say, this comp here, this giant comp moving around. And I was doing this so that everything would stay in place in the template when you reloaded everything. But realizing how much extra work that was and how heavy it was making it and how difficult it was making it to update something. So I had this empty composition. This is where your arm would go, right? And then if something gets messed up, it's hard to place your arm. So now what I'm doing in the new template is, so we've imported the chippy character, and I have the chippy character's left arm. So now all I have to do here is I'll go into this composition and just drop the character's arm in and line it up the way I need it to be, right? So there's a little bit of tweaking involved, but then what that does is then I can turn this off, and I'll go back in here, and the arm is there. And I can put anything I want in there now. And that's sort of I haven't linked all the puppet pins on this character and stuff yet, but I can put anything I want in that arm piece, and it'll work just fine. So you can see I've got to work out some of the starching and stuff like that because it's not deforming very nicely. But so that's kind of the point, is that now I could put a foot in here if I want to. I don't know why it's got this white thing on the bottom. I'll have to fix that. But now there's a foot. And if we go back to the rig, he'll have a foot in his arm. So what this also means is that you could have multiple arms that you draw and create rotations inside of them and actually swap out opacities inside of that composition. So it's just, I think it's a better way to work, of just allowing whoever's making it to drag and drop their assets in there instead of having to do it the way I had it before, which is that you would have to re-update your Photoshop files. So anyways, it looks like I've got some extra pieces floating around that need some cropping and cleaning, but so I'll get this guy out of here. But that's kind of where that's all going. So I've done all the rigging essentially for you, and then I'm sorting out all these problems and all the hard stuff, and then you can just kind of stick whatever artwork you want in it. And so I've also been experimenting with I'll just open this up really quick. So we have that character, that character, and then I'm doing this character, which is a much skinnier character sitting inside the rig. And the thing that you can do with these characters, because of the way it's shaped, is if you make the head really small, the character just naturally feels taller and skinnier and crazier looking. So you really just have to work inside of these structures, and then you can make the character however you want. I mean, as long as it's humanoid proportions and stuff. Obviously, things get a little bit trickier if you want to add your own arms and things. But then you really just have to focus on the structures and not redoing the whole rig. So anyways, I'm playing with a few different character designs, and then I'm going to experiment with swapping them in and out and seeing how they work. But essentially solving the whole rigging problem up front, right? And dealing with that, so that that's not the thing beginners and stuff have to deal with. It's not their main concern. But anyways, all that to say, thanks for hanging out. I'm going to take off and get back to finishing all this stuff up. I hope this was helpful to you, and thanks for hanging out, guys. It was nice to see you guys again. It's been a while, but anyways, I'll talk to you. I'll see you next Wednesday at I believe 1 o'clock Eastern Daylight Time. Anyways, I'll see you guys.